The city of New Albion shimmered under a silver rain, its skyline pierced by the Capitol spire, a monument of glass and arrogance. Inside its vast marble halls, the world had gathered to witness what would later be remembered as the Night of Ashes. At the center of the storm stood Caleb Ward, the nation's youngest and most charismatic minister of justice. A black man from the working districts, Caleb had risen like a comet, eloquent, incorruptible, loved by millions. For many, he wasn't just a politician. He was proof that the system could still birth something pure. That night, under the golden chandeliers of the National Tribunal, cameras flashed as Caleb prepared to deliver a speech that would shatter the country's power structure. A dossier exposing high-ranking officials, white and black alike, who'd siphoned billions meant for rebuilding the southern slums. Every journalist wanted blood. Every senator wanted silence. But as Caleb approached the podium, a sudden tremor of whispers swept the hall. The giant screens behind him flickered, static, then movement. Someone hijacked the feed. The crowd gasped. A video began to play, grainy yet unmistakably damning. It showed Caleb in what appeared to be a secret meeting, exchanging envelopes of cash with a known arms dealer. His voice echoed, "This must stay between us. No records. No leaks." The hall exploded in chaos. Reporters screamed. Cameras spun. The same networks that once praised him now dissected his expression frame by frame. Caleb froze, his hand gripping the podium, eyes searching for the source of betrayal. He knew that voice wasn't his. It had been altered, manufactured. But truth didn't matter anymore. Spectacle did. Within hours, his name trended across the globe. Caleb Ward, the double-faced reformer. By dawn, his resignation was demanded. By dusk, his security clearance revoked. And by the end of that week, Caleb Ward, once the pride of a nation, was exiled into the shadows, labeled a traitor, abandoned by everyone he trusted. The rain hadn't stopped in 7 days. In a small apartment overlooking the gray alleys of District 12, Caleb stared at the flickering light of an old lamp. The television in the corner replayed fragments of his downfall, looped, analyzed, weaponized. He no longer answered his phone. Not even for Amira, his former deputy and closest confidant, who had vanished after the scandal broke. Everywhere he turned, he saw faces that once smiled now whisper. Shops closed their doors when he walked by. Children who once waved now hid behind their mothers. He'd gone from savior to serpent overnight. But deep inside the wreckage of his thoughts, something darker began to stir. Not anger, but clarity. Someone had crafted this. The video, the leak, the timing, it was too precise, too rehearsed. And whoever did it wasn't just after his career. They wanted his legacy erased. Then came the letter. No sender. No return address. Just one line written in neat, deliberate handwriting. You were never meant to make it this far. Inside the envelope was a data chip. Caleb hesitated, then slid it into his old tablet. A video opened, a security feed from the night before his public speech. The footage showed a group of powerful figures meeting in a private chamber beneath the Capitol spire. There, among them, was Governor Roland Pierce, his longtime rival. Beside him sat a familiar face, Amira. Caleb's stomach tightened. She wasn't missing. She was part of them. The betrayal sank deeper than any headline could reach. That night, as thunder cracked across the city, Caleb made a silent vow. Not for revenge, but for truth. If he couldn't reclaim his name, he'd expose theirs. Weeks passed. Caleb vanished from the public eye. But beneath the city's veins, in the data streams and abandoned tunnels of the underworld, he began to move again. He sought allies not from the elite, but from those forgotten by them. Among them was Dr. Leona Price, a white cybersecurity analyst once silenced for exposing military surveillance abuses. Another was Malik Graves, a hacker and former journalist who'd lost his job for reporting on corruption. Together, they formed an alliance of ghosts, truth-seekers bound by the scars of betrayal. Leona uncovered something horrifying. The video that destroyed Caleb wasn't fabricated by amateurs. It was created using the Aurelia system, a government-grade AI used to manipulate evidence in counterterrorism operations. Access was limited to 3 individuals: the Prime Minister, the National Security Chief, and Governor Roland Pierce. The deeper they dug, the more they found. A vast network of forged scandals, media manipulation, and orchestrated chaos. Caleb hadn't been the first victim. He was just the most dangerous one. By the second month, they had enough data to implicate half the upper cabinet. But they needed proof that the public would believe, undeniable, uneditable human truth. That's when Caleb decided to do the unthinkable: infiltrate the same tribunal hall where his downfall had begun. During the nation's biggest televised event, Unity Day, the same stage, the same crowd, the same world watching. Only this time he would write the ending himself. The storm that once drenched New Albion had ended. The city now baked under a colorless sky, as if the rain had taken all its conscience with it. Somewhere inside the forgotten quarters, behind shuttered windows and layers of digital interference, Caleb Ward prepared for his second appearance on the national stage. The plan was precise. Leona Price handled the system's override, buried deep in the city's communication grid. Malik Graves gathered the fragments of data, the internal memos, unedited security feeds, and the raw voice signatures that could expose the forgeries. Their target: the Unity Day broadcast hub, a fortress of signal towers and media conduits that controlled every live feed across the nation. Caleb memorized the plan as he might a prayer. The same podium that had broken him would be his instrument of rebirth. He stared at his reflection in a cracked mirror. The face was leaner, eyes darker. He still carried the cadence of a public servant, but his voice, when it came, was quieter, steel-wrapped in calm. "They took my name to protect their system," he said to Leona, as she fine-tuned the data encryption. "But names can be rebuilt. The system can't." Leona looked at him, her fingers pausing on the keyboard. "Once this goes live, they'll come for you in person. Then I'll meet them in daylight," Caleb replied. "I hid long enough." The Unity Day celebration sprawled across the capital. Music, parades, aerial drones spelling slogans about harmony. At the center stood the tribunal hall, now remade as a symbol of reconciliation. But under its marble surface, a digital war brewed. Caleb moved through the crowd disguised as part of the maintenance crew, the ID badge borrowed from a contact who owed him more than gratitude. His path led him through a maintenance shaft beneath the main chamber. The air was heavy with dust and static. From her hidden van several blocks away, Leona whispered through the calm, "You're almost at the junction, 2 guards ahead. Your clearance code should hold for exactly 40 seconds once I trigger the pulse." Caleb reached the door. The scanner blinked red, then green. He slipped inside. The server chamber was cathedral-like, towers of processors humming, blue lights pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat. The Aurelia system lived here, the machine that could shape lies into reality. He inserted the drive Malik had built. The screens flickered, code cascaded like falling rain. Then, one by one, hidden files opened, proof of altered evidence. Doctored images, synthetic voices used to destroy political rivals across all parties. The final folder bore his name, Ward_case_24A. When he opened it, he froze. There were 2 files, the fake video and an unreleased second clip. The latter showed him on the same night, confronting Governor Pierce in private, saying, If I expose you, they'll bury me. Then you'll be doing their work for them, Pierce had replied. The exchange was real. Caleb remembered it. But the first video had been built by splicing this footage with others. The truth was always there, buried under the louder lie. "Leona," he whispered, "I've got everything. Then it's time." The ceremony began above. Governor Roland Pierce walked to the podium with his trademark grin, the cameras sweeping across the hall. Behind him, banners proclaimed unity through trust. He began his speech, words smooth, tone paternal, until the lights dimmed, and every screen across the nation blinked. At first, the crowd thought it was a technical glitch. Then, Pierce's voice cut out, and Caleb Ward's appeared. He stepped into the light. Gasps rippled through the hall. The disgraced minister, presumed finished, now stood beside the podium. His clothes were plain, but his presence filled the room like returning thunder. "I was told to disappear," Caleb began. "But truth doesn't vanish because it's inconvenient." He motioned toward the screens. The hacked feed began to play. Not the forged scandal, but the raw data, the chains of edits, and the uncut footage showing Pierce's complicity. Every image, every timestamp, every internal authorization key scrolled before millions of eyes. "You were never watching the truth," Caleb said. "You were watching their fiction." Security forces moved in, but the crowd pressed forward, shouting, filming, streaming. The guards hesitated. No one wanted to be the face of suppression on live global feed. Pierce tried to speak, but the hall drowned him out. The power structure cracked, not from bullets or flames, but from exposure. Leona's voice came through the earpiece, trembling with relief. "The data's replicating. It's mirrored on every public network. They can't stop it now." The confrontation. Caleb turned toward Pierce, who stood motionless under the lights. Their eyes met, the old arrogance replaced with something hollow. "You should have taken the offer," Pierce muttered, his smile forced. "And become like you?" Caleb replied. "No. I'd rather start from dust." Pierce leaned closer. "They'll rebuild the lie. They always do." "Then I'll rebuild the truth again," Caleb said. He left the podium to the roar of the crowd, escorted not by guards but by citizens who formed a path for him to pass. Outside, the city had stopped moving. Screens everywhere showed the revelation. Commentators stumbled for words. Across the districts, people cheered, not for a man, but for proof that deception could be undone. The next days unfolded like a dream written by two hands, one hopeful, one afraid. The Prime Minister's office announced an independent investigation. Governor Pierce resigned under pressure. Though rumors swirled, he'd fled abroad. Amira was arrested, her betrayal captured in the released footage. Caleb, however, refused interviews. He retreated again, this time not in hiding but in reflection. He returned to District 12, walking through streets that once turned their backs on him. Now, people nodded, whispered blessings, offered small smiles. The city had seen its own reflection and didn't like what it found. One evening, as the sky bruised purple over the skyline, Leona visited him. "They're offering you reinstatement," she said. "They want you to lead the new commission." Caleb watched the horizon. Rebuilding a system from the same walls doesn't make it new. "Then what will you do?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Teach others how to see the cracks before they break." He opened the small envelope he'd carried since the night of his fall, the same letter that had begun it all. He tore it in half and let the pieces scatter into the wind. "They told me I wasn't meant to make it this far," he said. "They were right. I was meant to go farther." Months later, in the outer provinces, whispers spread of a new movement. The Horizon Pact, a network of citizens, journalists, coders, and activists determined to preserve transparency in governance. Their symbol was simple: a single ember over an open palm. At its heart was Caleb Ward, not as leader but as mentor. He rarely spoke on record. When asked why he'd returned to obscurity, he only said, "Truth doesn't need a face. It needs witnesses." And so, while the Capitol rebuilt its monuments, somewhere far from its glittering towers, truth learned to walk again. Quietly, stubbornly, unstoppable. 2 weeks after the Unity Day broadcast, the city of New Albion was no longer the same organism. Parliament Square, once a symbol of order, had become an open-air forum. Protesters stood shoulder to shoulder with clerks, teachers, engineers. Every corner hummed with arguments, hope, and disbelief. Caleb watched it all from the window of a modest hotel above a bakery that smelled of burnt sugar. He had not slept a full night since the broadcast. Truth, he was learning, was heavier than silence. Leona entered with 3 data drives in her hand. "Every network wants an exclusive," she said. "They're calling this the Ward Revelation. Some want to crown you, some want to crucify you." "Let them argue," Caleb replied. "If they're fighting about truth, at least they're talking about it." Malik arrived later that morning, his face lined with exhaustion and excitement. "We tracked Pierce's accounts. Offshore, encrypted through shell charities. Enough evidence for 10 trials. But there's a bigger problem. Someone inside intelligence is deleting files faster than we can copy them." "Then we work faster," Caleb said. Pierce's countermove. Governor Pierce had not vanished, as the press believed. From a villa hidden on the northern coast, he made his own broadcast. A slickly produced speech blaming the chaos on a foreign-funded cyber operation. He admitted to poor oversight, but claimed the Aurelia system had been stolen by radicals. Half the country wanted to believe him, half didn't. That division became his shield. Within days, mobs clashed in the streets. One side chanting Caleb's name, the other calling him a traitor. Social feeds exploded with misinformation, new edited clips, and counterfeit testimonies. It was the same weapon turned against itself. Leona slammed her laptop shut. "He's learned from you. He's seeding 10 lies for every truth we release." Caleb rubbed his temples. "Then we change the language. We stop proving them wrong and start teaching people how to see." The next months became an education campaign rather than a crusade. Caleb and his small network opened digital literacy centers in the poorer districts, teaching citizens how to verify sources, track metadata, and recognize synthetic media. The work was slow and thankless, but the idea caught fire. Students turned it into challenges on social platforms. Journalists began citing the lessons. A new phrase entered the nation's vocabulary: mirror proof. Evidence tested by multiple, independent eyes. Behind the scenes, however, the remnants of the old administration plotted to erase him again. One night, as Caleb left a community meeting, a convoy of unmarked cars followed him through the rain-slicked streets. He ducked into an alley, heartbeat hammering. The first car stopped, a door opened. A familiar voice called out. It was Amira, released on conditional terms after turning state witness. Her tone was brittle. "You think this is over? Pierce isn't your only enemy. There are 12 names on that list, and every one of them is scared of you." "Then they should stop building lies," Caleb said. "They won't. They'll build bigger ones." She tossed him a small drive. "That's what you missed. The prototype of Aurelia 2. It doesn't forge voices. It forges memories." Caleb stared at her. "Why give this to me?" "Because I believed once. And I'd like to believe again." She vanished back into the car, leaving him with a new threat that could rewrite the very idea of truth. The new system, Aurelia 2, was worse than he imagined, capable of implanting fabricated memories into public databases, even court archives. If it went live, history itself could be edited. Caleb called an emergency meeting with Leona and Malik. "We can't out-hack it. We need to expose the project before it's deployed." Malik nodded slowly. "Then we go to the source, the data authority in Havenport." Havenport was the coastal technology hub, a city of steel towers and neural servers. Getting inside meant walking into the lion's mouth again. They traveled under false names. The plan? Leona would infiltrate the control servers. Malik would broadcast the real code to independent archives. Caleb would confront the board publicly to force a freeze order. It was chaos waiting to happen, and it did. Security alarms screamed before they reached the top floor. Glass walls lit up red. The board's chairman appeared flanked by guards. Cameras hovered on silent drones. "Minister Ward," the chairman said coldly, "you are trespassing." "I'm preventing history from being rewritten," Caleb answered. "History is written by governance, not by ghosts." Caleb raised his voice. "Governance without witness is tyranny." The feed went live. Leona had triggered the external broadcast. Millions watched the confrontation unfold. Malik's code flooded the cloud, freezing Aurelia 2 before launch. The guards hesitated again. No one wanted to silence a live hero. By dawn, Havenport's skyline flickered back to white light. The servers were sealed pending audit. The country had narrowly avoided another manufactured reality. A month later, Parliament passed the Transparency Charter, a reform package mandating open-source verification for all digital evidence. It was hailed as the greatest democratic advance in decades. Caleb refused to take credit. He declined awards, interviews, documentaries. Instead, he returned to teaching. His small network grew into the Horizon Pact that citizens now whispered about with respect. One evening, he walked along the riverfront where his journey had started years earlier. The city lights shimmered in the water like coded messages. Leona joined him, hands in her coat pockets. "You know, they still don't understand why you never ran for office again," she said. "Because I don't need a title," Caleb replied. "Titles are how they keep score. I just want the next generation to stop playing their game." They stopped at a memorial wall listing journalists, whistleblowers, and reformers lost to the system. Caleb touched one of the names. "Truth isn't a destination," he said softly. "It's maintenance." Leona smiled. "And maintenance never ends." They stood in silence as the first snow of the season began to fall, erasing footprints but not paths. Years later, a student documentary chronicled the Ward revelation. The narrator's voice closed the film. History remembers Caleb Ward not as a savior but as a reminder that when power edits the truth, it is every citizen's duty to restore the original file. In a quiet room far from the Capitol, an older Caleb watched the broadcast. The world outside was calm. He turned off the screen and looked out at the sunrise. The horizon glowed amber, and for the first time in a decade, he allowed himself to rest.